What is going on here? Why don't I see them? Okay. There he is. Hey, what's up, buddy?
I'm the first one here, really.
No, you're the second one here by definition.
Well, that's a good point.
Got him.
You got me.
Would you please put yourself in the center? Look at that. What are you doing? Like you're like kind of off the angle.
I'm perfectly center. What are you talking about? Look at this.
There you go. Oh, you're perfectly centrist, huh? Now we got a Conaboy centrist arc. All right.
Right down the middle.
Conaboy Kasparian.
I'm gonna do the rest of the show like this, just
that
to
would
piss
drive me
Josiah
nuts.
off.
It would piss me off.
Just
that
like
would
this.
honestly trigger the hell out of me.
Now you can tell I'm in the center because I've got pretty much perfectly the LGBTQ flag, and not the American or the Texas flag.
Yeah, but it's still not in the center. Like it looks more like a check mark instead of a V at the moment.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
This guy.
It's all right.
You know, gains a few YouTube subs, thinks he knows everything about production all of a sudden.
I know next to nothing about it. Next to nothing.
Let's see. Well, it's about that time when Hutch has trouble entering the back room, and we got to figure that out.
A euphemism, or the hell is that supposed to mean? There he is.
It's a tradition, you know.
There's that guy.
There he is.
Hey,
does this mean I'm live on? Is it when I join it goes live?
I assume.
There it is.
I think that.
I assume. I've never been on the guest end of this, so I can't tell you. Only a Conaboy and Pisco can tell you.
So I don't know. You were live before this, Hutch. So that's the conundrum. Is I go live when the show goes live. So if you're already live, I assume it just doesn't do anything extra. But
no, I end the stream because I didn't realize it, but I'm pretty sure it's when you click join that it pushes it, or maybe I don't know. Have I been live on Twitter for longer than that? Actually, no. Yeah, I've been.
No, definitely. If you're not already live, yeah, I imagine as soon as you click join, it goes live. Well, no, it shouldn't. Actually, I think
it
when
should do it. Yeah, it should do it when the first person kicks it off. I think so.
Yeah,
it would be Josiah, I think, that triggers the stream to go live. But
I'm triggering.
It's pretty, yeah, you are triggering, Josiah.
Trigger.
Right? Jesus.
All right, let's see here. We're just waiting on Pisco. Pisco said he's urinating, so
nice.
Yeah, don't know why he just doesn't take the phone in with him.
Who's got the worst? Who's got the worst prescription out of the two of you?
Probably me.
Mine is very light, very, very.
Yeah, mine's pretty bad.
Oh no,
mine's pretty bad.
That's rough.
Mine's more for astigmatism than like.
Do you have an astigmatism in each eye, or just one?
I think both. Yeah. So if I'm not wearing it, like I can see, but my sense it feels kind of nauseating without glasses.
Yeah. My wife, I've taken her glasses and put them on occasion, and I don't know how she exists in the world if she doesn't wear glasses. Like sometimes
sexist.
She just won't wear glasses sometimes. I'm like, I don't know how you just don't bump into shit all the time. You're incredibly blind. It's like opening your eyes underwater. That's how blind she is. It's ridiculous, but she finds a way, I guess.
Yeah, Esme can't. She just can't even see if she doesn't wear her glasses.
Who? Your girlfriend?
My fiance. Yeah, she can't. She's straight up. She just sees blobs.
Yep. That's my wife as well. I don't know what her exact prescription is, but it's like a pretty unbelievable prescription. It's like a prescription I didn't even know was possible, like -8 or some shit like that. It's like, what? I didn't know numbers even went negative on prescriptions, but apparently they do, and they do by a lot if you're extra blind. But where's Pisco, Josiah?
Buddy, I don't know. Pisco is always late.
We need our lawyer present.
We want to exercise our Sixth Amendment right to counsel.
Yeah.
By the way, before Pisco gets here, everybody listening, the four of us are doing a debate on Dylan Burns' Hippy Dippy this weekend, this Friday. We're debating a bunch of conservatives about something about the election. So What time is it? I know it's Friday.
I think it's 6:30 ET. So it's
I thought it was 8 o'clock.
No, I think on the thing it says 6:30. No, it says 6 p.m. EST. It's actually
6
even
p.m.
earlier. Yeah.
Wait, hold on. 6 p.m.
Wait,
6 p.m.
stop.
EST or PST?
No, it is 6:30 EST. I was looking at the Joe Lewis thing I'm doing tomorrow, but it is 6:30 EST though. And I'm looking forward to that, frankly. Okay. You live stream Twitch poll people, you stay up way too late. All right. Or at least streaming too late, man.
You're talking to the wrong guy. I'm in bed watching my programs by 8 p.m.
I see.
Max.
Okay.
Programs.
My
stories.
story
Your sitcoms.
Hutch was in Milwaukee with me and Destiny over the weekend for canvassing, and he did go to bed very early and stayed in bed very late. This guy hibernated.
He says that it was like 8:15 when I got up.
Pondering, would you ever debate your sister on stream? Hell no. Okay, and I'll tell you why.
No.
I'd love to see it.
I'll tell you why. So I love my sisters, all of them, but I actually, a few years back, so my brother-in-law, the one who is married to my most Trump devout sister, my brother-in-law likes to talk shit about politics, which is fine because sarcasm is our love language in this family.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like sending me like reels and stuff through Instagram in a DM, making fun of Biden or whatever, and I one back about Trump, yada yada. It's just the nature of the relationship, which is fine. And I've got 4 nieces and nephews by her alone, and
are they Mormon?
Sorry,
are they Mormon?
No, they're not. They're just bored. So anyway, I forget how we got on the subject. We were going back and forth, and I was like, "Oh man, that's okay. I can't wait to take my nephew and register him as a Democrat." And my brother-in-law was like, "Oh, for my dead body, blah blah blah," and whatever. We let it go. And an hour later, I got a phone call from my sister, and she went ballistic. And it was a fucking joke because my nephew at the time was like 4 years old. Right? So it's like chill. The whole thing was a joke. Well, anyway, it got like crazy heated. So no, like obviously we have our political disagreements, but I give her a wide berth.
Yeah,
when it comes to politics. So
got a similar situation with part of my family. Funny story, didn't involve me actually. I just kind of allow, differing political opinions to go untested in the marketplace of ideas whenever I'm around family. And this didn't involve me though. My mom, she was talking to my first cousin, her nephew, and he was starting, I want to say he was starting high school or something like that. Maybe, I don't know, earlier than that. I'm not sure. No, it must have been middle school or something because this was during COVID. And she was asking him, hey, how do you feel about starting school back up? Are you nervous? What with COVID and everything? And she goes, hello, Pisco. Nice of you to join us.
She said, hello, Pisco. It's nice of you to join us.
And his mic doesn't even work. Unbelievable.
We can't hear a fucking word you're saying. This is unbelievable.
Nice job.
Most unprofessional shit. He just must pack up and move every goddamn night.
Shaves
or
his beard, shows up late, doesn't even have a working mic, interrupts my story. Most important thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she was asking him, you nervous about going back to school because of COVID? And he's like, no, I'm not really scared or anything. And she said, well, just be sure you wear a mask and social distance and stay safe. And that's what she said. And my uncle did not take too kindly to her advice of wearing a mask. Apparently that is not an okay thing to tell a child to do in his household. And this led to a protracted family disagreement. And I didn't even know this was happening. I was just blissfully unaware of this whole situation. Apparently it was a real argument though. And eventually my mom had to tell my uncle to fuck off, basically.
You're touching on something that's super relevant. I don't know about you guys, but one of the most common questions I get in my chat, maybe not one of the most, but it's a pretty common question I get is, how do I change my MAGA parents' minds? I discussed that. Yeah, well, I'm about to get to that. No, your mic's still not working.
Nice job, Pisco. Unbelievable.
And I discussed it on yesterday's stream. I said, I think you're asking the wrong question. I think the question you should be asking is, how do I accept my parents' political beliefs? Because it's just I don't know, maybe your audiences, like everybody in Josiah's audiences, just type yes or no. Have you been able to change your parents from a MAGA voter to a Democratic voter? It's going to be like 1 out of 100. So
yeah, so my dad, so my mother passed away back in 2018, and she was a Trump supporter when she died. But what was interesting was before she died, she went to Germany for work. It was the first time she'd ever been out of the country, and she was gone for about a month. And she came back a less radical woman. There's no question, because, and she told me, you know, she was kind of a diehard Trump supporter, and then spending time abroad and, you know, working shoulder to shoulder with the Germans there and getting to know them and getting their takes on American politics really changed her views on Trump, the narcissism and the greed and things like that, as well as, German culture versus American culture. You know, she talked about how efficient they were, and they were nowhere near as wasteful or extravagant as the United States. And I really believe she died, like 6 months later. And I'm convinced that had she, lived, I think she would not be voting for Trump in this election, which I suppose she's not now, but I mean, for different reasons, that I think she would have voted for Kamala, because my dad's kind of, also was a Trump supporter in 2016 and 2020. But January 6th, that blacklisted Trump. Like, he's no longer an option as far as my father's concerned. But yeah, unfortunately, like, that's why I can't really identify with people who are like, hey, listen, the way to de-radicalize your family is to talk with them. Because ironically, I don't think I've ever made any serious strides with members of my family.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I think that my experience with people changing their political opinions is it's relatively similar to my own political trajectory, which is that your political ideology is very experientially derived, right? So, like, unless you can really change someone's entire environment, like Josiah is describing, go to a different country, surround yourself with totally different people. The reason that works is the same reason why when people move to big cities, they become less racist, right? It's like, well, I mean, it turns out I was just wrong about, what I thought about these people being surrounded by different people, for this extended period of time. And so, I think similarly, unless you're able to do that, it's going to be hard to do for converting your people to not be Trump supporters. Either that, or they have to have, like, I guess Josiah's dad, they have to have sort of an interpersonal, profound experience, either from watching the news or seeing something happen, or like, I've heard a lot of conservatives say, oh, I stopped hating gay people because my son came out as gay. Like, they have to have some, like, very personal reason for changing their opinion.
Right.
Very difficult to just debate someone out of their opinion at least over a short period of time. It takes quite a long time in my experience.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Awesome. Sorry about that, guys.
Wait, what is up? Yeah, we can hear you, but what is up with the quality of that microphone? What is going
it bad?
It's
I think it's mic. On your. Yeah, it's the wrong mic.
You can do it. I almost called you Josiah, Pisco. I
Shut
apologize.
Your fucking mouth. Yeah, are you kidding me?
I apologize.
I would never be late. I am prompt.
It's still the wrong mic. You can't hear that well.
It's still the wrong one, Pisco.
I mean, it's better than hearing nothing from you, so it'll work.
Okay.
Is it?
One second.
Is it Josiah?
Yeah.
Is it better?
I don't know.
No, touching on what you were talking about a moment ago, I think in the modern era, haven't there been studies to demonstrate that the more you try to fact check someone out of their political opinion, the more they harden in those beliefs? I feel like I'm not making that up. Like, that's an actual thing, right?
I'm going to fact check you on that, Hutch.
I haven't. Yeah. I haven't seen that. I've seen that when someone's media appetite is highly polarized, that if you expose them to media of the opposite persuasion, they do tend to become even more partisan, right? That they don't respond very well to, like, oppositional viewpoints, which is a rough one. But people do, it's like, I don't know, if you take a Trump supporter and just, like, to have them spend a year with only, surrounded by Democrats their whole entire existence, it's like, eventually those opinions will probably soften, because, I don't know, I mean, it just turns out that Democrats aren't so bad, you know. But
How's this? Any
depends on the
better?
person.
No, it's
Testing?
the same, but I wouldn't worry about it, man. Like,
Okay,
let's,
all right. Sorry about
yeah,
that.
no, it's okay, man. That's all good. How is Pisco's volume to chat? Does he sound like, do I need to compensate for whatever the fuck's going on with his mic? I can like increase his gain.
He sounds a little bit quiet, I think.
Like a dick?
Just
Oh.
like a
bit
little
quiet,
bit.
a little bit quiet, a little bit quiet, a little quiet. Is that better? Any better? Better?
Sounds fine to me.
That's probably good, yeah.
Okay.
Fuck.
Sorry about that.
No, it's not your fault, buddy. Well, I mean, it probably is.
It might be my fault.
I don't
I'm
know why
trying
I
to-
covered for you in that respect. It probably is your fucking fault.
Yeah.
to- Sorry.
Unbelievable. No, somebody
How
says
you
it
guys
sounds
doing?
like he's in a bathroom. Oh, well.
So I got a question for you boys.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Mhm.
it's the night after the election.
Okay.
You wake up, you pull open your phone, and you see that Donald Trump has won the presidency and the Republicans have won the Senate and held on to the House. What are you going to do?
I'll probably have like an honest to God existential crisis. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would do.
My
I
house
may
is
be
only
MIA for,
2
like, a
stories, so I don't
That's why
think
you got to
it would-
jump out of the window multiple times.
No. I
I'd
want to
probably
know what
like-
you're
that's fair.
actually going to, how you're actually going to process that.
I don't think you can give up.
Oh
I'm
my
not.
God,
damn.
Is that
Pisco.
better? Wait, is that
Jesus.
too loud?
You don't
That
have
was
to
much
deep throat
worse.
the mic.
God.
You piece of-
Holy
Whoa, is that better?
Christ.
Am I live?
That is
That's
better. There you go.
better.
You got the right mic there.
Okay, cool.
There you go.
All
What?
right.
You plugged it in this time? What the hell happened?
Yeah, it's plugged in. All right, guys.
Wait, turn it back up. Turn it back up.
Turn me
Jesus.
back up. Turn
I
me
need
loud.
to turn it back up.
The people need to hear my voice. Testing.
Jesus.
Good,
That's
good,
better.
good.
Yeah. There you
All
go.
right.
Yeah, we can't give up, folks. And I do think, and none of it will be undermined, and I think none of what I've said about Trump will be contradicted by an attitude that isn't like black pillar. I'm just not a doomer person in general. And so just because I think Donald Trump presents an existential threat and that his election would be one of the greatest threats to American democracy in the history of the republic doesn't mean that I would give up and just resign myself to that fact. And so if that means, going to join Mark Elias and getting some litigation in the works for whatever comes down the pipe, that's what it means. If that means making sure that we're ready for the next election and to make sure that there's no shenanigans, that's what it means. If it means protesting on the streets for the rest of my adult life, that's what it means. But I'm not going to be black pill about it. And you can look to me. I'm definitely going to be upset if that's the result. I'm definitely going to be sad. I'm definitely going to be angry, all that combination. But if that happens on election night, look to me for anti-doomerism, because I don't want to give up this country to the anti-Republican, small r, dick bags that run the MAGA party.
Pisco in his Gandalf the White arc, showing up at the Battle of Helm's Deep, with the white angelic glow behind him. Look to me at the dawn of the first day or whatever.
Yeah.
It is.
We get a new generation, new ideas, new thoughts for the next generation to fight.
Can you
against
imagine?
Trump
Can you imagine Gandalf like with Pisco's energy? Sauron, answer the question:
Oh.
yes or no?
Yes
Sauron?
or no, Sauron? Would you or would you not export every single orc?
I would
boy?
Yeah, me personally. I mean, look, I'd be real sad. I'd be real sad and upset for probably a long time. Probably at least like a solid month or two. Like I'd be really down about it. I would be sad. I know that Pisco's saying, keep I guess Pisco's not necessarily saying like, oh, just like have a positive attitude. He's more saying, be consistent about fighting back and stuff like that, which is a little bit different. But yeah, I'd be real sad. I'd be real sad for a long time. Continuously, I mean, like, I think that I've said this for a while now, and it accumulates over time that, I do think personally, my judgment for you as a person does get harsher and harsher if you continue to vote for Trump. Like, I didn't have much judgment for people that voted for Trump the first time because I felt like that a lot of people protest voted. A lot of people had like these sort of shallow reasons. But then it's like, hey, you saw what this guy did over 4 years. Nobody's not like really aware of what Trump's doing over the last 4 years when he was president. It's like, okay, you're pretty dumb if you voted for Trump in 2020, especially if you voted for him a second time. If you vote for Trump a third time, he ends up winning. Like, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? Like, the fog needs to clear. This guy's insane, and our country is all the worse for it. I mean, it's a real bad thing. And I don't know. I mean, I'd be pretty dismayed about it. Of course, I'd cover it and, it'd make for good discussion and policy talk and stuff like that. But, I would be genuinely scared about what the future would hold for our country for sure.
before Hutch answers, we did get a super chat from
is that
Pisco's
the Adam?
BFF, Adam Friended. Guys, make some predictions so if Trump is elected, we can see your predictions come true. I'm not a prophet, but the one that I am quite comfortable making is that Trump will dismiss all of the criminal cases against him and fire Jack Smith. And that in and of itself, that alone is a sufficient reason for those of you watching to vote against him. There will be no accountability for Donald Trump.
Is that actual a friend of the stream, Adam? It is. Oh, look at that.
That is Adam Friended of the stream.
And let's be clear about what that means, right? And this is from Adam Friended's account of what January 6th was. And I'm not taking Adam Friended out of context. Adam Friended calls this an attempted coup by Donald Trump in the aftermath of January 6th. Adam Friended said Trump is responsible for that. Adam Friended is the one who said that this is fucked up. This is one of the reasons, until he changed his mind when Biden was the candidate. Adam Friended said this is the reason why I'm not going to ever vote for Trump. Again, that was him before, and then he changed his mind once he saw the black box of Joe Biden, and now I don't know what the excuse is for Kamala Harris. But that is his accounting of January 6th. And so under Adam Friended's own accounting, what seems to be like passe, no one's even arguing whether or not Donald Trump will. And I'll put $10,000 on the notion that he will dismiss those cases 100%, as Josiah said. That would mean no justice for those actions and for what constituted in his mind an attempted coup of the United States government.
Damn,
how can you be okay with that?
He came in with a $20 super chat, and you just went full scorched earth.
Well, he even said he goes a constitutional coup. Yeah.
I
don't know what that means.
A constitutional coup. I mean, here we're mincing words. A constitutional coup, a regular coup. Is a constitutional coup worse than a regular coup?
Wait a minute. What I would want to know is if he means the coup is constitutional or it's a coup of the
it was constitutional to do.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's legal to do what he's doing, then how could you call it a coup?
What we hear from people all the time, or I shouldn't say people all the time, but like a lot of Trump supporters, is that it was a fringe like edge case, or it was like an obscure constitutional theory. I don't know if that's what Adam was getting at, but like, goddamn.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the only prediction I'm confident making.
I can make
one. I'm sticking with my prediction. I'm calling it a clean sweep. I think she's going to take all 7 swing states.
Well, wait a minute. He wanted a prediction. Like, do you have any predictions about Trump?
If they win.
If Trump wins, do you have any predictions that you're reasonably confident to make?
Well, so the first thing that he did during the transition in 2016 was pick a fight with some Republican politician. I can't remember who. It was someone who didn't like swear loyalty to him. And so he was on the phone in the first like 2 weeks trying to jockey to push this person out of power. I'm forgetting who the person was. So there's no question that he's a vindictive guy, and he will, I'll just say generally speaking, he will absolutely try to use the power of the presidency to pursue some vindictive agenda. And then as far as policy goes, I don't know.
I mean, I think
the border situation is going to get fucked up. I do believe that he will try to do like if I had to give you like the like an actual like prediction of what's going to happen, he's going to do some crazy shit with deportations. It's going to get so much negative press because, the sight of, families being thrown in vans and stuff, it's just not going to, it doesn't matter what the polling says about, it's like 50-60% of the country supports like mass deportations. As soon as they see it and experience the consequences of it, there's going to be a massive backlash. So realistically, I think that would be like probably first on the timeline.
I think that we'll see the most radical cabinet in all of American history. And I don't think it'll be close. I think that he'll try to appoint people who are radicals. I think a lot of them will have very significant trouble getting through a Senate, because even if the Republicans win the Senate, it's probably not going to be by a huge margin. And I do think that people like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, like, they're not going to vote for Stephen Miller to be attorney general. Like, most likely they wouldn't. That'd just be my assumption.
I think Murkowski, to throw you a bone here, I agree that Murkowski, I think at this point has demonstrated sufficient backbone. I mean, she's publicly said she won't vote for him. I don't know if Collins has had the stones to admit that or not. I'm less certain on her, but go ahead.
Well, I think that won't. I think ultimately he'll just acting appointment everyone, and like a lot of norms will get tested in that regard. Like, I mean, a lot of norms will get tested in with regards to like, can the acting attorney general order this and that, like sweeping deportation, stuff like that. I think that I think we'll see probably a great expansion of attempts at federal power, like Hutch said, mass deportations, Civil liberties will probably get trampled on, especially if you're an undocumented immigrant. This is something that, in theory, constitutional conservatives should be against, right? Like I saw on Twitter the other day, when for instance, if the Constitution, if the understanding is that like, oh, the Second Amendment says the government can't infringe on people's ability to buy guns, that includes immigrants, right? Like immigrants and non-citizens have rights in this country as well, insofar as the government's just limited from doing certain things. And I think that those theories will probably get tested significantly. I'd be very nervous about that.
Also, Alito and Thomas. I was about to say Alito and Thomas will retire.
Busted. I knew it.
Yeah. Alito and Thomas will retire, and they'll be replaced by two MAGA Republicans, and Trump will have created not just a right-wing supermajority, a MAGA majority Supreme Court that will preside over us for decades until eventually the rest of the world gets on board and decides to make the Supreme Court the bottom bitch of the three branches the way that God and the founders intended, unlike what Pisco wants. Pisco, of course, wants judicial supremacy. Fuck
yeah. And he absolutely will appoint Elon to come in there and just gut the federal agencies, like
Chief of Staff Elon Musk.
He'll go into the the head office of the EPA with a kitchen sink and fire like 80% of they will absolutely do that 100,000%.
The only reason I caveat on some of the policy stuff, keep in mind, it's not a policy election. It's about character, and to the extent that Donald Trump has a clear policy here, it might actually face some barriers in his own incompetence, his own senility, and people who control him. And so you're going to see a lot of, I think, attempts to do things that I don't know how successful they'll be. He'll certainly have a more servile set of individuals around him, but he's much less competent than he once was. So we're going to have to really be testing the reliability of the people around him who are more sycophantic, but maybe also have some more autonomy to control him.
I'll tell you what, though, I do think if he wins, he's going to get crushed in the midterms in 2026. So, I think I understand. Like I'm with you, Econo Boy. I think it's going to, if that actually happens, like a full trifecta for Republicans, I will definitely feel like crushed. But I'll lick my wounds for a little bit, and then I will come back just thinking like, all right, what's going on in 2 years? Let's start working towards that.
Hutch restarts his Call of Duty arc at the end.
I'm out. Yeah.
I do think such an emboldened Trump will be deeply unpopular. And I do think that, like, it's a bit of an accelerationist viewpoint, right? But I do think that if Trump were to win in 2024, I think that his policies would genuinely be so unpopular that I think that I'd have to imagine in 2032, we would see something kind of unbelievable. Like we'd see like a Democrat get like 60%. We'd see like an FDR level election in 2032. And to be fair, that's under the assumption that Trump just does what he says he's going to do, right? Like if now he could take office and just moderate significantly and not do the things he said he's going to do.
No,
I would imagine that won't happen. Can
we talk about that for a second, though? Because this is important, because I got thinking about this, ever since the disastrous hippy-dippy debate that we had with Cam Higbee, actual Justice Warrior and Lauren Southern, this idea, can you guarantee that Donald Trump will end democracy? No, I can't. That was never the claim in the first place. But here's the thing. Even if Donald Trump does nothing that he has repeatedly said he wants to do and promised that he wants to do and that his closest supporters want to do, let's just take the premise that Econo Boy laid out there. Just giving Trump a second term alone is, in my opinion, morally unjustifiable, because it will have effectively rewarded him for attempting to overthrow the government and the Constitution, and the Constitution and an election. And all that will do is signal to smarter, more ideologically driven authoritarians in the Republican Party that if they do the unforgivable, there are no consequences. So even if we had a crystal ball and could predict with 100% that Trump's just talking shit to hype the base up, he just wants to avoid going to jail, that's the only reason he wants to become president again, he would still be objectively, morally, and ethically and civically inferior to any Democrat in terms of the candidacy, and you should still vote for any viable alternative over Trump, period. That's
it would be an indictment on. I'm sorry to say, the American people. I have to say that, and we're certainly would be a time to reflect inward. Listen, guys, I'm not 100% over the 2016 election. If you think about everything that would have been prevented had a few different people voted like a different way in 2016, I'm over it in the sense of finality, but I will never get over the fact that we lost that election in 2016. And so if the question is how mad will you be if it happens, very, very upset, very, very sad, very, very mournful, but we're not going to stop fighting, and we're not going to stop fighting against Donald Trump specifically if he were to win another term.
To Adam's, like, maybe one of his fundamental points, like, I don't think that this will be our last election, if Donald Trump wins or anything like that. That would not be part of my I don't think that's like most likely to happen, but certainly, again, it's these degradations happen over time, right? I mean, they're not often very quick processes, right? People talk about the Nazis, for instance, taking over that democratic experiment, but that was over a period of time, right? I mean, I think Hitler was through 2 or 3 elections at the time when he took over, and he had to use a lot of sort of, force.
Boys, stop right there. Piers Morgan insists we cannot use the 2 words Trump and Hitler in the same sentence. How dare you? Sorry.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is that Trump might not be the actual death blow to the American democratic experiment, but insofar as democratic backsliding leads eventually to a non-democratic mode of government, Trump would be part of that process, almost certainly, right? And I think that that's very scary. The idea of like Trump winning in 2024 and then anointing Don Jr. or Vivek or just whatever sycophantic person to take over after him, and using like state media and political investigations to undermine opposition. I mean, these are things that Trump could do, right? And especially with this immunity, I mean, what's to stop him really from doing things like that, right? So
you guys are missing completely the biggest danger of Trump winning in 2024, which is that we are going to hear so much armchair quarterbacking from Twitter socialists. It's going to make me jump off of a cliff in Minecraft. Like, it's going to be, it's going to be so bad.
But here's an interesting question. Someone asked me this on Discord the other day, and I really couldn't give an answer. I wasn't sure. Someone said, if he wins, what do you think the reason is? And that was a very difficult question for me to answer, because I truly just couldn't imagine it. Like right now, my confidence in Kamala winning is actually pretty high. And I
cost
don't
living.
But like, I don't think I'm missing anything truly fundamental about people's worldviews right now. Like, I kind of understand why Trump supporters are voting for Trump. I understand why Kamala supporters are voting for Kamala. But I just think there's more Kamala people than Trump people. So I would have a hard time answering that question. I guess Pisco says cost of living maybe is a bigger deal than we thought, but I don't know.
So
I have a difficult thing.
Our Adam, friended of the stream, says, I will tell them why JD Vance is not lying if you think
About
it will
what?
make them spurg out. Yeah, I'm not. If you could clarify.
I'm confused.
Yeah, happy to hear it, Adam.
And then also he says this is getting delusional. Still not sure.
I don't know what you mean.
You are welcome to clarify, sir.
Yeah.
Come on. I mean, look, I think these are all pretty well reasoned political takes that we're having. I mean, none of us are saying that Trump's gonna, institute a dictatorship or something
on day one. Who would say that? No. I'm like curious. What is the delusional take amongst the things that you've heard? Like, is it delusional that he's going to fire Jack Smith? Is that delusional?
Someone says
he can come on if he wants.
Yeah. Oh fucks says bring Adam. Oh fucks. Oh, I assume that's how you pronounce it. Zero fuck. I get it now, buddy. Zero fuck says bring Adam on. Yes, we have space for Adam if he wants to join.
Well, we had like we had some good presidential polls yesterday. I think there was a YouGov poll that had Kamala up by like 5 points nationally, and then Quinnipiac came in. Did you guys see that poll today?
It ruined my afternoon.
Link, baby.
Bro, Quinnipiac, I think was it Wisconsin or Pennsylvania? It was one of the 2 states. They would have you believe that they would have you believe that she went from +5 Harris in the last poll to +4 Trump now. So they would have you believe there was a 9-point swing in the last 3 weeks. So Something is really fucked up with their polling, man. I simply choose not to believe it because that's ridiculous.
However, I will say I like that they released that poll. Something that Nate Silver's talked about. I can't remember the word he uses for it. It's like some sort of biased grouping where like basically what some pollsters will do is like if they see the polls going a certain way and they have a poll that's very herding.
Nice.
If they see the polls going a certain way and they have a poll that based on their same methodology goes against that narrative, they'll refuse to release it or they'll change their methodology. So credit to Quinnipiac. They said, look, our methodology shows a 9-point swing. That's what it shows, and
there was another pollster.
Was
it Siena? Was it New York Times Siena? I think it was.
They have her up by 3.
Well, no,
14
so she actually had a good New York Times Siena poll yesterday, I believe. But the one that came before that, they tried to say that there was similarly like a 9 or a 10-point swing in Arizona. So I just listen. I just think we have this firmly established pattern at this point of Democrats overperforming polls, and it keeps happening. I guess there was a governor, there was a different somebody who was mentioned in the chat. There was some race in an Alaskan city where a Democrat won by 6 points in a city that swung to Trump by like 12 points, and this is going on again all over the fucking country for the last 2.5 years. And so
Adam Friend responded and said Econoboy was the delusional one. Trump doesn't have the motivation to be the next Hitler. He wants to golf and be remembered as a 2-time president.
Econoboy wasn't talking about the motivation of.
Let me take this one.
Yeah, go for it.
All right.
Don't you Econoboy explain?
No, he just doesn't listen. No. Like he makes assumptions. He doesn't listen to what Econoboy said.
Yeah, exactly. Like Adam, I'm not saying that. I feel like I literally said Trump isn't going to be a dictator or end elections or be the next Hitler. But as far as there is a process by which countries go from democracies to not democracies, that it is a process, Trump's second term would be part of that process. Not that he would he wouldn't 100% the no deaths run to anti-democracy, but he would be part of that process. And again, I think based on what Josiah said, Hutch said, Pisco said, what we've said in the past, I don't think that's unreasonable. I think that part of becoming anti-democratic as a country, authoritarian as a country, is challenging fundamentally the ability of the free press to organize, the nonpartisan and apolitical investigative bodies that exist, the nonpartisanship of the military and the civil service. These are things that Trump has promised he will do. He will challenge these things. And of course, that is bad. That is bad for our democratic process. I don't want the guy sending out Social Security checks. I don't want the administration in charge of that to be like purely partisanly appointed, right? And that's unfortunately what Trump is.
I just want to address something real quick. So Adam completely misheard what Econoboy said. Econoboy was describing backsliding and the nature that there's like a process by which countries will fall into dictatorship, that it doesn't necessarily just occur at a drop of a hat, and to explain why Trump could remain a threat to democracy. Nonetheless, he wouldn't be a dictator in the term of his office that comes on. Adam Friended completely misunderstood because he misheard or just can't understand what Econoboy just said. And then is in the chat now saying, how? By going golfing? Before acknowledging...
really quick, Pisco, I said how as well in my...
Yes, he did say how, and you also didn't listen to that. So number one, no acknowledgement that you completely whiffed on what Econoboy said. That's number one. Before
you getting one guy,
be like, oh, sorry, I misunderstood you. I completely fucking misheard what you said. And then number two, you've already acknowledged by your own words that he attempted a constitutional coup. So by your own words, you know the kind of shit that Trump does. And you, by your own words, in 2022, 2023, when we had those conversations, you said you'd never vote for the guy, presumably because you have some kind of sense that he's an institutional threat. Not this is a fucking news to you, dipshit.
We are getting one guy. I just want to point that out.
I know, but it's listen, like we talked about in our recent Twitter spaces that we've done. And by the way, the four of us need to do one because we've been doing them piecemeal. It's fun to have conversations with people with whom we disagree. All four of us constantly invite disagreement and whatever. So it's fun to have a persistent antagonist there, although I do question how good faith he's being. I will also say, Pisco, when it comes to the constitutional coup thing, he didn't clarify. He might have meant that he thought that the coup was constitutional and therefore...
Well, I guess we'll not find out because if Trump wins, because Trump's going to get rid of Jack Smith. And that has not been tested in terms of the Supreme Court ruling on the nature of the conspiracies alleged in the indictment. And so if you care about finding out whether or not we are correct that it is illegal. Maybe you don't want Trump to win and immediately dismiss, as he undoubtedly will, the indictments pending against him. Maybe that's a reason not to vote for him. But you're still on the fence because why?
Yeah.
Well, on the topic of having conversations with people that you disagree with, Josiah and I are going to be having a conversation with Kyle Kalinske and Crystal Ball coming up here.
Wow.
Pretty soon.
Is that true?
Both of you.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if we can say when. I don't know if we're supposed to say, but it's soon. It's soon. So that's fun.
What is the topic of discussion, Hutch?
I put up a video yesterday talking about Kyle Kalinsky's take on Kamala accepting Liz Cheney's endorsement, and I was talking. I feel like I didn't go very hard. Like I was kind of tame in this one. I gave him props for when he took Breonna Joy Gray to task. I thought that's legitimately like one of my favorite political videos of all time. Him doing that. But I pointed out that sometimes I think he has bad political instincts, and the leftist instincts to go like full scorched earth on their enemy, I think is not the move in 2024. We're going to talk about that.
And we've talked about that on the show before. I feel like, I guess I thought you kind of agreed with me on that topic, where my opinion was essentially, I don't know how politically efficacious this will be. I mean, it's not like a big deal, but I don't know if I like it. That was kind of my thought on it. But
with what being politically efficacious, the endorsement,
basically like very publicly accepting that endorsement and campaigning with her, stuff like that.
Well, so no, I've said from the beginning that with very few exceptions, I think it's perfectly fair to coalition build and to accept these endorsements. I just don't know how much I'd emphasize the Dick Cheney endorsement. Liz Cheney, I understand. Right. Like basically, if I was Kamala Harris and I was going to cheerlead any of the Cheney's endorsements, it would be Liz, not Dick. And even then, I just think that it's good to acknowledge, say, hey, listen, we have fundamental disagreements. To be clear, those have not changed. She's not grifting. I'm not grifting. She still wants, tax cuts for the rich, or what you can be as politically correct in the language you want. Like, make it clear. Nobody is like, because here's the thing. The progressives are, I'm going to throw them a bone here and say, understandably concerned. Like, oh my God, is this a sign that she is going to become more conservative on policy? So I do think it's important for Kamala to at least gently signal, like, no, Liz Cheney will not be, she will not be shaping policy in a Kamala Harris administration. My issue was the enthusiasm behind the Dick Cheney thing. I seem to recall like a really prosaic statement from the Harris campaign, which I understand why people are like, just acknowledge it and say, thank you, Mr. Vice President, and move on.
I feel like that's her putting Arizona in the crosshairs, going after those McCain voters. And I feel like it was specifically for Arizona. I could be wrong.
Maybe. And again, I understand. So like she and Liz Cheney appeared recently at an event together. I don't have an issue with that. I think Dick Cheney is the one that I would be very careful about being seen as too cozy to. So that was my take on it.
I was talking about it on the stream today, but I feel like the boomers and the silent generation, they came from a time when, and these are the most high propensity voters in the country, like it's like what, 85%, 90% of boomer or silent generation vote, and slightly less for boomers. And they grew up in a time where bipartisanship was not, it was just the way things got done. So Reagan, for example, I think Democrats controlled the House for the entire time that he was president. And he did not have trouble finding plenty of Democrats to sign off on his legislative agenda. And the inverse was true too with presidents like with Democratic presidents as well. Yeah. And so those boomers and the silent generation people, even if they're sympathetic to Trump, stuff like bipartisanship actually matters to them. It doesn't matter as much to younger voters. And I feel like younger voters are more inclined to want to go scorched earth. Like, what are you doing sharing a stage with Liz Cheney? How could you? That's a betrayal. But for older voters, they see that and there is some appeal there. And I just feel like you have to take that into consideration, especially when, dude, every single swing state is within 2 points. Like, this is shaping up to be the closest election since 2000. It's actually kind of, in a way, it's closer because it all hinged on Florida last time. And anyways,
if you believe the polls, Hutch, if you believe the polls, I'm a little bit.
If you believe the polls,
skeptical.
Well, Well, speaking of I was going to say, speaking of the polls, hasn't Vice President Harris, at least according to that New York Times Siena poll, I think her support among Republicans went from 5 to 9%. So she's nearly doubled it, in the span of a month. I mean, I don't know. Listen, I think, nobody here, even these professional electoral political operatives, they don't have crystal balls. It is entirely possible that in this gambit to appeal to right-wing centrists, they're going to lose or depress the turnout among progressives who are already upset about the situation in Gaza, or because they think that Cheney will have more of an influence on the Harris administration's policy than progressives. It's entirely possible that they've got this wrong. But I do agree with Hutch that there is a sound logic behind it. And if we believe the polls, I think, again, New York Times Siena, they said that Harris had a 93 net Democratic, so 93% of the Democratic Party is behind her. Whereas with Trump, it was only 80% in that New York Times Siena poll. So that was a pretty staggering gulf.
Tell me if I'm wrong, okay? If we imagine a voter that was so turned off by seeing Kamala on a stage with Liz Cheney that they would decide to not vote for them, that person was already not voting for Kamala in my mind. I don't feel like you can find a single person who's like, yeah, I like her, $5,000 child tax credit. Yeah, I like her $25,000 grant for a home. And but oh my God, she was on a stage with Cheney, and so therefore I can't. I don't think this person actually exists. I think that person was already had a problem with her, probably because of Palestine and Israel. That's just my 2 cents.
My instinct would be that this is a net beneficial thing for her to do in terms of her popularity. It does kind of suck, because I think that where Kamala, in my view, does fall behind, even, certainly compared to the Biden campaign in 2020. And you could argue that some of the same criticisms applied to 2016 Hillary's campaign. And I don't mean to draw too many. A lot of people say this is Hillary again, and I think it's different for a lot of reasons. But, she has not really sort of crystallized a very pointed progressive policy message. And I do think that's probably not good for her political chances. The calculus is obviously, hey, run a skinny platform, run a moderate platform, poll test every issue, don't speak out of turn in that regard, stay on message. And that's what's going to lead to us being able to get these independents, these moderate conservatives, these suburban types. I don't know. I mean, Biden was able to win in 2020. He got a lower percentage of Republican votes than Hillary did. He got a higher percentage of Democratic votes than Hillary did.
Is that right?
Based on exit polls that I've reviewed, yeah. Now,
wow. That's surprising.
That seemed to work, right? Now, 2020 was much more of a turnout election than 2016. I think 2024 is probably going to have lower turnout than 2020, just my guess. So maybe all these things are a little bit irrelevant, but I don't know. I think overall it's a balancing act. And I think Kamala, I'd love her to come out in favor of more progressive policies. What even is Kamala's healthcare plan? I don't know.
She did just yesterday, right? I'm sure you like the Medicare expansion to in-home care, right?
Yeah.
That's a great policy. Right?
That's not bad. I saw that. But no, I mean, I think that there's probably, she's backed off of a lot of her positions, and I don't know if it's necessarily required to, right? So her Medicare for all thing, she backed off of. She was kind of wishy-washy on that. The banning fracking thing I can understand, because ultimately I think as an environmental issue, that's actually not even that necessarily that big of a deal. But, I think that having some good crystallized policies from the progressive end, I think would help. The child tax credit's good. It's not that it's bad, very good for poverty. The EITC expansion's good. But I think that adding on a major healthcare piece of legislation, or major tax reform, something like that, I think that could make a good positive difference. I mean, it's marginal, but it could make a difference.
So Be Serious Birdie says, nope, Liz and Dick Cheney signify the neocons have switched parties because I think there are more war opportunities with the Dems than the Republicans. It's massively significant for the anti-Iraq war people. So let's talk about this for a minute, because Donald Trump has an unearned reputation for being a dove when in fact he was quite hawkish. Mehdi Hassan, whom we'll probably talk about a little later because he was in some Twitter beef with, Brianna Joy Gray and a couple of others, did a really good video about this about a month ago and just spent 5 minutes going through the many, many, many examples of Trump's ruthless hawkishness. And I will remind you that the United States is involved directly in one less conflict under the Biden-Harris administration, because it was under President Biden that we actually got out of Afghanistan. Trump promised to do it for 4 years and failed spectacularly. There were far more drone strikes under the Trump administration, by far orders of magnitude, than under the Biden administration. And to the extent that people want to say that, Ukraine and Israel are proxy wars for the United States, we don't have boots on the ground, and those wars were triggered by those foreign belligerents, not the United States. So, I mean, people are free to jump in if they want, but it's bullshit, this idea that Harris is the hawk and Trump is the dove.
I don't think the reason that Cheney's endorsing Harris is because she just, really wants to go to a bunch of different wars. That would be my assumption, and I don't really have. I mean, I think I have reason to believe that in some regards, Kamala's presidency will be less progressive than Biden's on certain issues, but I certainly don't have reason to believe that Kamala will start a whole bunch of wars as soon as she becomes president, or anything like that. That seems
if Nikki Haley was the candidate, Liz Cheney would endorse Nikki Haley. It has nothing to do with policy, and this kind of touches on what I wanted to sort of like insert into the conversation. Kamala is not reaching out to the center necessarily. Like, she's not promising them like these super right-wing policies. It would be she's definitely pivoting to the center, which is a tactic that I fully understand, but she's not out here promising people like Liz Cheney, like big tax cuts for the rich, deregulation, more war. It's purely rooted in this idea that we need to protect our democracy from an autocrat like Trump. That's all it is. It doesn't say anything about the Democratic Party that Liz Cheney is endorsing Kamala. In fact, it's the opposite. It says something about the Republican Party, that you have someone like Liz Cheney who would be willing to commit political suicide and endorse a member of the Democratic Party. It's just a really silly, myopic, bad faith, dishonest framing of why these endorsements are happening in the first place.
Be Serious Birdie had a follow-up. Is that the public perception? You can say that if you like. That's not the impression of the majority of people.
Yeah, I don't think the American people. I was going to say, I don't think the majority of people are thinking to themselves, the neoliberal turn has infected the Democratic Party because the neocons and the neolibs, they want to go to war with Iran, and that's the calculus that they're making. It could be crazy to think this. I don't think a majority of people's voting calculus, I don't think that's really priced in, if I had to guess. I don't think most people think that way.
Pisco, go ahead.
Oh, no, just that I don't think that the neocon issue or the similarities and disparities between the left and the right, or the Democrats and Republicans on this issue, is moving a lot of people, or it's one that's like visibly apparent to the average voter. And so unless you're bringing statistics to bear, I'm not convinced that there is a sizable difference in people's perceptions, unless you want to bring some data to sort of unearth that initial perception. We checked the tape. It was W that started 2 wars in the Middle East, and it was Barack Obama who ended the first war in Iraq, with a slight kind of period for ISIS, a slight extension during the ISIS kind of craze. And it was Joe Biden who was advocating for the end of the Afghanistan war in Obama's presidency, and then actually ended it under his own presidency. And so by my calculations, it looks like there were 2 wars started under a Republican president that were ended by 2 Democratic presidents. And so I don't know where you're getting this, that the Democrat politician, or Kamala Harris in particular, are in support more for these neocon interventionist wars than before. Joe Biden has made it very clear in his withdrawal speech about Afghanistan that America doesn't do this thing anymore, and that we're more focused on special forces and these kind of targeted interventions as opposed to full-scale regime change. It's not really our bread and butter anymore. And Kamala Harris is going to be promoting more of the foreign policy of Joe Biden.
So real quick, Econoboy mentioned, whether or not the Harris administration would be less progressive than Biden's. And I do think there are some potential troubling signs about that. And I do want to visit that. But I did see that Adam is still in chat, and that he did offer a kind of an opinion on the vice president. He says, there's a competency level for president I'm not sure Kamala meets. I also
come on, man.
I also think she's unworthy historically to be the first female president.
So first of all, just notice that let's take those two phrases up. Let's put them up there real quick.
Sure.
So number one, we can sort of interrogate the first line about competency and then compare it to relative standards vis-a-vis the previous candidate, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump. So put that aside. The second one is pure identity politics. For a group of individuals, that is Sitch and Adam and their audience, that prides themselves on being above identity politics, on trying to get away from what's the doctrine, the educational doctrine. Oh my God, it's
critical race theory.
Critical race theory and diversity programs, diversity initiatives. It would be bizarre to me that in your own personal diagnostic for who should be the next president, you would be considering the historical implications of the identity of the candidate that's running for office as opposed to their relative merits vis-a-vis the other person. So go ahead.
So I just want to ask Adam. Adam, would you bet $1 million that Trump could list all three chambers of government or all three branches of government? That's the question I want to ask. We'll see what he says.
I
wouldn't.
I would not. I wouldn't take that. I wouldn't bet $1 million. Maybe. I mean, he probably knows the three branch. I wouldn't bet $1 million on it though.
I think you need to ask a more obscure. I wouldn't. I would bet $10. Let me put it like this. I would bet $10.
Josiah, I would bet $1 million that Kamala could.
Right.
I would bet $1 million because she definitely could.
Right. And I would bet $10 that Trump couldn't list the three branches in 5 seconds. I think he would need an uninterrupted 60 seconds to remember them. I mean, listen, here's what I'll say. Because this kind of harkens back to the last conversation I had with Sitch and Adam, with which I was not fully satisfied because Adam, I think, was not willing to offer an affirmative vision for why he was supporting Trump. He was interested in interrogating our views, but not particularly interested in letting us interrogate his, which to me was a sign of insecurity about his position. But he did offer one here. He's like, listen, I don't think that Kamala is competent to be president. The question is, do you think Trump is? And if you look at the polls, Kamala Harris is seen as more competent than Trump. She beats him consistently in poll after poll after poll after poll after poll in terms of competence,
because
mental and physical fitness. Of course.
Because she so self-evidently is.
Of course. I agree with that. But basically, since President Biden dropped out of the race, the questions that people have about age and fitness and competence have now flipped to Trump. So people rejecting that and saying, no, I actually did fuck what the polls say. He's just a dynamo behind the scenes, right? Basically saying all the same things about Trump that they said about Biden. I would be interested in hearing why someone thinks that Kamala is not competent to be president, but that Trump might be.
Can we harken back? Like, let's rewind the tape. It's 2020, and it's shortly before the election. And Jonathan Swan sits down.
I'm sorry, real quick, because Dana Bo just said something here. He said it's something for Econo Boy, and I don't want to forget. Econo Boy, please make a face for the thumb promo, please. So while Hutch is talking, please do that.
Okay, should I make? I don't know.
All right, we're gonna rewind the tape, and it's 2020, and it's roughly like 1 or 2 months before the election. And Jonathan Swan, who was at the time an Axios reporter, I'm not sure if he still is, sits down in a one-on-one interview with Donald Trump. And during that interview, Donald Trump starts to complain about the COVID numbers in the United States. And he says, just very earnestly, unironically, he keeps making the point over and over and over again that we wouldn't have as many COVID cases if we just didn't do as much testing as we were doing at the time. I don't know. I can't think of like there's not a lot of things that I can think of off the top of my head that can demonstrate an incompetency that is almost difficult to imagine. I mean, the idiocy.
He couldn't pass his legislative agenda. He couldn't hold on to any cabinet officer. He couldn't drain the swamp. He couldn't get Mexico to pay for the wall. In terms of competency, he's undermining or contradicting the notion of what it is to be president by betraying his oath under your own terms in a constitutional coup by your own words that you say is illegal. And it's visibly apparent, unless you are blind and deaf, that he's senile. He's going crazy. He doesn't make any sense. Only a blind and deaf or hopelessly partisan person could look at the the two different candidates as they're talking and come to the determination that Donald Trump is more competent. How could you possibly, seeing their resumes, seeing the two individuals, conclude that Trump is more competent, or that Kamala Harris is not competent after being a senator, an attorney general, and more competent than Obama was, given their relative records? And I think if you think that Obama was a good president.
So or their debate, she ran laps around him effortlessly.
Yeah, but that's the thing. So Adam, if I remember correctly, I don't want to put words in his mouth because I know how that goes if you don't get it 100% correct. But I would be willing to bet $10 that Adam said that Trump won the debate, if I remember correctly.
Oh my God.
I want to say that. Maybe I'm wrong. Adam, correct it in the record. Of course, if you're lying, I'll blow you up on social media. But I'm pretty sure that is what he said when he did his review, because I think I tuned in for a bit. So he says I'm not supporting Trump. I'm not sure if I'll vote for Trump. And if I do, it'll be reluctantly. I mean, that's progress, the fact that you're not now certainly voting for Trump. But again, I think at the end of the day, I think you can't make an affirmative case for Trump's competence. As Pisco said, the Biden-Harris administration accomplished much more of their agenda than the Trump-Pence administration accomplished of theirs. And that is the ultimate sign of competence, right?
Dude, Adam, please wake up. I mean, I know that you and I, we had a bad spell, and maybe some of the other people here. Wake up. This is not about policy. None of it. I support Kamala Harris' policies. It's not about that. We just talked about George W. and starting all these wars. I would take W's endorsement for, in any scenario, if it would help Kamala Harris's chance of winning the election. This is about character and fitness for office. After what happened in the last election, what he tried to do, how could you possibly be considering voting for this animal? This guy is going to destroy everything you love, this country, if you give him the opportunity to, and if he has the power to. The only thing that will hold him back is the incompetency that he has demonstrated, or the grace of the people that he has around him. Please don't do something the whole world is watching on us. History is watching us. How can we elect this guy?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, to put a pin in it myself, Adam, I just genuinely cannot. I can't, because Adam and I, we spoke a long time ago about MMT, right? And for literally anyone on the planet to even know what MMT is and to be able to explain it, that tells me pretty analytical person, likes to get in the weeds on some things. Obviously, I don't necessarily
modern monetary theory.
Yeah. Well, no, but listen. Point being made though is that it's Adam. It's I don't think Adam's a totally stupid person. Obviously, he seems like a decently smart guy, right? But it's Adam, I can't imagine an intelligible reason. I can't imagine an intelligible reason to vote for Trump over Harris. It literally makes it is a better argument to vote for Jill Stein than it is to vote for Trump. It's a better argument to vote for Cornel West than it is to vote for Trump. It's just strictly a better argument.
There's a clip of Jill Stein talking about pardoning January 6 people.
Yeah,
did you guys see this?
Still a better argument.
Yeah, she was on a MAGA podcast.
Trump's promising to pardon all the cop beaters. I mean, does that
again, to me, I think there's the arguments against Trump are so robust and multifaceted. I think we should just stick to competence, given that was the qualification that Adam brought up. At the end of the day, Biden-Harris got more of their agenda accomplished than Trump-Pence. That is the ultimate sign of executive and legislative accomplishments, because that's the goal, to get their agenda accomplished while they're president and vice president. The fact that Biden and Harris checked off more boxes on their list than Trump did of his, I'm sorry, even if you completely despise the agenda itself, it's a sign of greater competence, the fact that Biden and Harris got more done. You also have numerous former Trump officials who work closely with Trump say that he has a short attention span. He doesn't read the presidential daily briefs. He doesn't read any of the material. They had to reduce the material and basically dangle car keys in front of his head to get him to pay attention, wave a laser pointer in front of it to get him to look. You have so many people actually coming out and saying that he is mentally unfit to be president. He's too stupid, incurious, ignorant. You don't have people saying that about Vice President Harris. And even with staff turnover, there was a 92%, I think, turnover rate for the Trump cabinet, according to Pew
Including
Research.
His vice president.
Yeah, precisely. So just no matter how you slice it, even if you absolutely despise, you're a conservative who despises the Biden-Harris agenda and you openly support the Trump-Pence agenda, as Bill Barr said, if you like Trump's agenda, Trump's not going to be the guy to get it done because he's just too
He's
stupid.
lying right now
So,
about the hurricanes.
yeah.
Like right
So there's
now,
no. I'll say this: there's no good case. There is no affirmative case to make for Trump's competence over Kamala's. Anyone who takes that position will always 100% lose that debate.
Well, Josiah, you said you wanted to talk about this Piers Morgan debate that was hosted.
Yeah, before we get to that though, because there were some like economic things that Dan Crenshaw said. That Dan Crenshaw said in that debate that I did want to take a look at. But you guys also mentioned that the Harris campaign
might be less progressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do think this is worth noting. So AOC, made a shot across the bow. She didn't directly identify the vice president, but this was in response to a tweet about Mark Cuban. News: Harris surrogate Mark Cuban doesn't believe Harris should keep Lina Khan as the Federal Trade Commission chair. Quote, if it were me, I wouldn't, Cuban said to Semaphore at the KFF lunch. Quote, by trying to break up the biggest tech companies, you risk our ability to be the best in artificial intelligence. To which Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez said this: let me make this clear. Since billionaires have been trying to play footsie with the ticket, anyone who goes near Lina Khan, and there will be an out-and-out brawl, and that is a promise. She proves this admin fights for working people. It would be terrible leadership to remove her. And I agree wholeheartedly, but I was curious what you all thought about that.
I retweeted that. I saw that. I think it's a good thing. On Three Wonks, we did a bit of a deep dive on Lina Khan and our opinions. So the hosts of the Three Wonks, it's me, obviously, Socialist SDL, and then Micah, who's kind of a more center-left liberal. And all of us had generally positive views on Lina Khan. Micah was the most skeptical, obviously being the most centrist amongst us, but Lina Khan seems to be doing a pretty good job. Like, I think in general, a decent heuristic. The only people that complain about her leadership are wealthy tech billionaires. Like, that seems to, like, every time you go on like CNBC or you go on Fox Business, and anytime it's somebody complaining about Lina Khan, it's either a Trump MAGA Republican or
hates her guts.
Yeah. Or it's like a wealthy tech billionaire, right? And I mean, there's coherent arguments that you can make as to why Lina Khan's strategy isn't optimal. However, I don't know. I think she's doing a pretty good job. I think her foundational argument is pretty strong, and I do think that Kamala, by potentially getting rid of her, that seems to be like, I mean, look, all these insiders want to get rid of her. All these donors are saying, we want you to get rid of her. I just think in general, that's a bad look. I think it's a bad look. You should probably stay the course. Biden's been a very pro-worker president. Keep at it. That's the thing I'm most afraid of. I'm afraid that Democrats are going to pivot away from labor and sort of big business towards big business to some degree. And that'll be pretty unfortunate.
Listen, I'm not steep in these issues like Econoboy is. My prior is that a lot of these new technologies, including crypto, that there needs to be regulation for a lot of these kind of developing fields. I am aware that Chair Gensler and the SEC have been doing some work regulating cryptocurrencies, that kind of thing. And I know that I'm not sure that it's exactly 1-to-1, but I don't think that we should allow these new emerging technologies, AI, things like that, to the extent that this is applicable to this discussion, to be free from like regulation or be the new wild west. I think a lot of people can get hurt as crises like the Sam Bankman-Fried. What's the name of that stock exchange thing?
The
FTX, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Those kinds of situations, like the perils of AI, things like that. I think that there's a lot of new dangers that we need a strong regulatory set of agencies to deal with and to protect the American people. It's no different than setting up guardrails for climate change and for weatherproofing residential homes and things like that. We need a robust set of regulators.
It's not necessarily just that. Like, she's done some things that, I mean, outside of the tech issues, things that people should just generally support. Like, she was part of the FTC. Well, that's the kind of more the big tech stuff, but she was part of the FTC, for instance, that really took on these non-compete agreements and said, look, non-compete agreements for the most part just shouldn't be a thing, right? Like, they're anti-competitive, they're bad for the labor market, they're obviously bad for workers. It's just, for the most part, and she didn't totally ban them, but for the most part, they essentially shouldn't be a thing. She's been really in favor and started to litigate things to advocate for right to repair. Like, the idea that basically you can't repair your own thing in sort of third party with sort of third party vendors. That seems pretty ridiculous that you can't just access the full compartments of these things without voiding potential warranties or losing features and things like that. Like that obviously seems kind of ridiculous. And then her broader philosophy is really positive as well. Essentially, for people that are listening, her main thought is that when it comes to antitrust action, the sort of view for the last 50 years has been this consumer welfare standard, right? Where, as long as prices are low, essentially, we can't say that antitrust activity, monopolization is really like bad. And some people might say, well, what the heck? I mean, what are you talking about? Doesn't that seem good? Like, yeah, if it's a monopoly, but prices are low, isn't that kind of all we care about? No, that's not all we care about, right? Competition is supposed to breed a few different things. Number one is low prices, but it's also supposed to breed innovation. It's supposed to breed variety. It's supposed to breed quality. And so, monopolistic competition, even if it results in low prices, isn't necessarily the only thing that we care about. And so she says we need to look more at ensuring competitive markets, not just ensuring low priced goods. And that's a very reasonable stance, but that's not been the stance of the FTC for the last 50 years. It's been this consumer welfare standard, which allows, places like Apple and Google and all these different tech companies, especially, to get around antitrust activity. And that's what she's really been challenging. And that's fundamentally pretty reasonable. And so, yeah, it would suck pretty hard if Kamala got rid of Lena Khan. I would have a lot of criticisms for her if she did it, if only for the reason that it would signal that she's listening more to, let's say, like the donor class of the Democratic Party and less to the progressives, which is probably, that's not really what I would want.
So on the topic of recent news, we're going to use Adam again, friend of the stream, Adam Friended of the stream, as a framing device. So he says, if Trump would be better for you economically, then they will try to shame you into voting against your own economic interest. Voting against your own economic interest is something that I want to pivot to a particular topic, but just as a general response, anybody take issue with that, or anybody have something they want to say?
We fight on the merits about whether or not Kamala Harris is best economically for the American people. When I think about like the American people, I think about it as what's best for our country overall on net. I'm sure that there are a lot of policies that Trump could do that would be in the best interest of particular groups of people. For example, the wealthiest among us. Would you still catch me arguing against those billionaires? Yeah. And would you catch me trying to shame those billionaires who are like, but I'm going to get a tax cut? Yeah, I guess. But like, it shouldn't matter like my tactics. What should matter is like the argument. Do I think that my vote for president should be determined by like, am I going to be $1 better off, or am I going to have a tax break? I think ultimately in this election with these candidates, if you're voting on the basis of, hey, I think that Trump's going to lower my taxes, I don't think that you've properly assessed the threat of Donald Trump. I'll make arguments against that. But I'm not going to give up or concede the economic argument, as I know that everyone else on this panel will not either.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say before I go to the particular topic I had in mind on that subject. Hutch, Econoboy, do either of you want to weigh in on Kamala versus Trump economically? And Econoboy, I'm sure you have a lot to say, so let's go to Hutch first if he has anything.
Well, just like find me any credible pollsters. Economists that believe that just universal tariffs are a good idea. Yeah. I just, this is he's clowned on for this proposition, and he's so committed to it. Like I don't like defend it. Are we 100% sure that he knows what a tariff is? Like in
that
practice,
would be the question.
He clearly doesn't. He's demonstrated that he doesn't know several times when he explains what tariffs are.
How do you defend it? It's like Brexit. You're taxing yourself. You're setting sanctions on yourself. One thing are like targeted sanctions towards a particular country for particular goods. Think of like the specific China sanctions. That's one thing. But a 20% across the board tariff, how can you be in support of that? That will necessarily cause inflation to go up.
Well, I think that Adam's question is a little bit more complicated, and it gets to a harder answer. And essentially, I think what he's saying is, well, there's going to be some portion of people. I think Pisco spoke to this a little bit in his answer. There's going to be some portion of people who it just is better for them, Trump's economy, right? So, for instance, when Trump was president, I remember watching a news story about aluminum workers, and he put in these tariffs on aluminum imports. And by all accounts, I mean, most economists would agree with this. And of course, you ask the workers there, they interviewed the workers there. They have certainly thought this as well. hey, these aluminum imports allowed me to keep working here, right? And this is a good job. You know, it's a middle class job. I don't need a lot of education to do it. If I didn't do this, I don't know what I would do. And that's the situation that a lot of manufacturing workers found themselves in, being in that sort of rough combination of not very educated, but skilled in a specific thing. And that specific thing just like doesn't exist anymore, right? That's a very empathetic viewpoint. I can totally understand where they're coming from. But again, you should never fall for the simple stories of populists. This is something that my co-host Micah said. And although it's the case that tariffs and certain economic policies that Trump do are good for some small percentage of people, obviously a federal government should think federally and nationally. What's like generally the case? And generally the case, 20% tariffs would be very, very bad. And we know for a fact that there's policies that would help people like these aluminum workers better and wouldn't result in economic calamity like 20% tariffs.
Could you explain? Sorry, could you explain to a layperson why would they be? What would be the broad impacts of a policy like a 20% universal tariff from anything imported into the country?
Well, it's just a lot of passed on cost, right? So the reason why Kamala Harris's campaign frames a 20% tariff as a sales tax is because if you think about it, right, the sort of retail consumer, like your end consumer, the people finally buying these goods, are going to end up paying almost the entire cost of that tariff. Or there's going to be a lot of goods that just aren't available to them because that, either it's, it's not marketable, they can't afford it to produce it, like the prices just don't work out. And so there's shortages for things that people might otherwise want. That's why she's sort of framing it as a sales tax. So what does it mean? It means that you're going to be paying a lot more for goods than you otherwise would. It means that your consumption probably has to be constricted because you can't afford these higher prices. And it means that you just don't have as much disposable income. It's why it's totally accurate to frame this as a tax increase because it's a tax paid that's trickled down to consumers. You end up losing out on a lot of money. For those that don't realize how radical this plan would be, the average tariff rate of goods that are imported in America is extremely low. We don't tariff a lot of things, and the things that we do tariff, even under Trump, very, very low rates. Like I think the average tariff rate is well below 1%. It's very, very low. Taking that number and tariffing every single good that we import and making that tariff 20%, that would be the highest tariffs we've seen in something like, 75, 80, 100 years or something like that. Like we just don't, modern economies don't tariff like this. It would be terrible. It would be terrible for the economy and for people and for efficiency. People would have to pay more for food, drugs, cars, talk about a cost of living crisis. If we tariffed everything by 20%, that would be basically a huge amount of inflation that's unequally distributed. It might be good. It might be good for people who work at aluminum manufacturing plants. It'd be terrible for everyone else.
And then, sorry, real quickly, why is a policy of targeted tariffs like not bad?
Why is it not bad?
Well, regarded as not bad by many economists, as far as if
you're trying to shore up domestic production in an area of like national security, if you want to develop your industry in a particular area, like import substitution, some like lacking industry that you think is very important, if there's some other broad international or geopolitical interest that's being promoted by it, if you're in the middle of a trade war and the kind of negotiational leverage, I mean, all that stuff.
If there's also some, there could frankly just be moral issues. Like if we have good reason to believe that like
child
chocolate
labor.
Yeah, like if we have good reason to believe that like 90% of the chocolate that we import from Ivory Coast is made with child slaves, we probably want to price that in, like that's pretty bad. So there's all a number of reasons why sometimes tariffs could be justified. But in general, what's better than tariffs if you want to support American manufacturing, this is bore out in the numbers, record investments, record employment in manufacturing under the Biden administration. What's better for manufacturing is not tariffs. It's just smart state industrial policy. It's investing in areas. If you want to have domestic manufacturing, just invest positively in American domestic manufacturing. You don't have to make everyone pay the cost of a tariff if you want to maintain certain key industries.
Gotcha.
So the specific thing that I was kind of going to use this to hinge on, about economic interest. So we just, Sean O'Brien was recently on Theo Vaughn's podcast, and he talked about how Democrats have fucked unions over, even though he himself is a Democrat. And, that, of course, rubbed me the wrong way. Obviously, like various Teamster chapters across the country have come out and endorsed the vice president, but the national network has endorsed neither Harris nor Trump. But my response to Sean O'Brien was this asshole literally stood behind beside a Democratic president as he released $36 billion in aid from a law supported exclusively by Democrats and opposed by every single elected Republican, which effectively saved the Teamsters' pensions. So the reason I think this is important to bring up, I mean, we can speculate as to what exactly is motivating so many unions. I think there was another one that came out today and declined to endorse the vice president or Trump.
Fireman's union.
But there can be no comparison between the two parties with respect to records on unions. You can say as the Democratic Party has an imperfect, perhaps even a woefully imperfect record on unions, but the Democratic Party's record on unions is objectively by far better than the Republicans. And anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar. And so then the question becomes, why would Sean O'Brien and other union leaders be less inclined to support the vice president? And some speculate that it's because many union members and perhaps even union leaders have been radicalized by culture war issues.
Yes.
Yeah. I think a lot of union, unfortunately, I think, there's kind of some composition effects here, right? So like some people they've posted graphs of like percentage of union workers who support Democrats over time, and like this percentage goes down. What they're not including is that the percentage of people in unions has just gone down over time. Like it's just a smaller and smaller group of people. And, look, I mean, this is a group of people that are disproportionately in those exact sectors that they think are benefited by these like broad-based tariff policies. There's just a lot of union workers nowadays who think that not only that is better for them, which I think is a propaganda point, but also like you said, I mean, frankly, a lot of union workers prioritize just like anything the fuck else than a party's position on unions. Look, every single time that I can think of in the last 20 years where the courts have ruled that workers' protections, parts of the National Labor Relations Act, all of these things, every single time I can think of where it's been scaled back, and it's been greatly scaled back since the peak of unions in the 1940s and 50s, it's been conservative appointed justices that have done it.
Always. I mean, this is it's so obvious. Republicans in Republican states are union busting all the time. So like I totally agree and co-sign with Josiah's notion that these are cultural issues and in the culture war. And I think that that's exactly what we're seeing here. And you're seeing angling from people who don't have the best interest of themselves. And it goes to show you that a lot of these elections, just like I think with some of our friends in the chat, it's very emotional. It's very emotional about how you feel. It's very emotional about your identity. And I don't think that you can draw any conceivable link between the Teamsters union and beneficial policies that Donald Trump provided. And honestly, like I could see certain unions that would co-sign a Trump presidency. I'm thinking of like particular industries where Trump actually did like scale back NAFTA or renegotiated.
The Border Patrol.
I can, but the Teamsters is not one of them. And I think that is kind of the point where I think Josiah is highlighting that a lot of these can't be explained by self-interest. Yeah.
We used to be a country where 20% of the country worked for a union, and starting in 1983 under Ronald Reagan, who went in there with an agenda of union busting, he was very successful. Union membership started to plummet on his watch. Now it's down to less than 10%. The idea was trickle down economics, and it just didn't pan out. And that's
about that 10%. It's about half public employees, right? So your private sector unions, I mean, they're greatly diminished for what they used to be. And so, I mean, to the extent that you support organized labor, it's just, I mean, Sean O'Brien, it's Sean O'Brien and then Sean Fain, the good Sean, the good Sean over at the car manufacturing workers union. He has a much more sort of pro-labor focus in this regard. And, it's like, look, if you support organized labor generally, it's just obviously the case that you would support Democrats. And if you prioritize other issues, if you prioritize other issues, you wouldn't.
Donald Trump did a Twitter space with Elon Musk, and they were laughing about Elon
union busing.
like firing, union busing, literally firing people for threatening to start a union, and they were laughing about it. I mean, it's just it's pretty wild, man.
And people need to remember that again. If Trump becomes president, that NLRB under President Biden and Vice President Harris, that's gone. The National Labor Relations Board, which is fought really hard, in a very hostile judicial climate for union protections, that's gone. So yeah, I totally agree. I cannot think of a rational, self-interested model for why the Teamsters have done what they've done, other than that they've been radicalized by culture war issues, which is irrational and quite frankly, I think should be made fun of. And of course, I can say that because I'm not a politician. However, I do on the subject, somebody in chat, Lost Highway, said, how about TYT trashing the Dems and supporting the Teamster head and not mentioning the pension bailout by Dems? So I should say, I do know what you're talking about because I watched that episode of TYT earlier today, and I was frustrated. I should say that Anna Kasparian, enlightened centrist, she did mention in the video that Joe Biden has been more pro-union than I guess she expected or than other presidents. And she just gave a very quick mention of that.
Name a more pro-union president.
You'd probably have to go back to like FDR or LBJ, I imagine. Yeah. But to even compete. But so she did acknowledge that fleetingly and then spent the rest of the video. And so did Cenk, unfortunately, glazing Sean O'Brien. As a matter of fact, Cenk specifically, and then Anna co-signed it, said that that Sean O'Brien is their favorite union leader. So even more so than Sean Fain. And what's so absurd about this is comparing. Yeah, exactly. Seriously. No, they said it. They said it. They didn't mention Sean Fain specifically. They just said that he is their favorite union head, which would obviously mean that would include Sean Fain. And the thing is,
they get into their reasoning?
Well, the reasoning is that he tells the truth. He doesn't just simply lie about the Democrats' record. But the thing is, he did lie about the Democrats' record. When you say that all the Democrats have done is fuck you over for 40 years, that is by definition a lie. It's a lie of commission and omission because it doesn't include the fact that even if you think, let's say you have very high standards and that the Democrats have not met it, that's fine. Sean Fain, the better Sean, also feels this way. Sean Fain, I think he's even calling for a general strike if I remember correctly, I think in a few years. So he's going to break the Democrats' balls. But he also, to me, he understands how leverage works, right? So if you remember, he withheld his support from President Biden. Then Biden went out and walked a picket line. But Fain didn't immediately give him his endorsement. He acknowledged what Biden did was incredibly important. He didn't just ignore it. He walked that tightrope. He jerked Biden off, right, in public, basically like, fuck yeah, this is fucking awesome. But he still didn't give them the endorsement until later on, until there were more concessions made, until Biden, signaled more solidarity with unions than he'd already had. That's leverage. That's applying leverage. That's like, hey, listen, if you do something for me, I will acknowledge it, not just like reluctantly, I will praise you. But if I think it's insufficient, I'm going to withhold my endorsement until you buddy up to me more. And when he did, then you give the endorsement. Biden and Harris saved the Teamsters' pensions. No Republican contributed to that. None. The American Rescue Plan, from which those funds were released, was opposed by every single Republican. And so for Cenk and Anna to co-sign this nonsense, I mean, what's Sean O'Brien's leverage? If, as a consequence of his lack of endorsement, or as one of the factors, Harris loses the election,
you're going to have Federalist judges appointed from the top of the judiciary to the bottom, and you're going to get fucked in every single court case of consequence for the rest of your goddamn life. I mean, how is this even a question?
It's an eminently predictable outcome. It's a certainty. Yeah. It's a guarantee.
I mean, you want to talk about elitists? I saw some mention about elitists and people being anti-worker. Who do you think is in the Federalist Society? These are the people who are going to be ruling on great and like it's already been said, on major pieces of legislation that affect union members. The courts have incredible authority to determine the scope of that legislation, and you better hope that you have union favoring or labor. People with some experience with organized labor in those positions. And if you want that, you need a Kamala Harris presidency.
Right. And so that's where I'm curious. Does anybody have any speculate, like, because it also kind of segues into the Mehdi Hasan, Brianna Joy Gray thing too, this notion of leverage, right? Here we're talking about it in the context of unions. But do you see a rational application of leverage in Sean O'Brien's refusal to endorse either candidate? Because I just don't see it.
It's about, that's where the constituency is. That's where his members are. So my intuition is that his members are Trump supporters.
I think that, well, sure. I think that there's from the data that they released, it seemed quite split up. And I mean, I don't know, at least certainly, I don't know necessarily how the Teamsters, every union has a different, more and less democratic process for selecting their leadership. So I'm not sure about the Teamsters specifically. But yeah, I mean, in general, it could just be because, he's got a bunch of Trump supporting members that he has to deal with. But I think, I don't know, Sean O'Brien just gives me a kind of a bad impression. Like, he spoke at the RNC. Now, to be fair, he said he would have spoken at the DNC if they had invited him. The DNC, I guess, did not want Sean O'Brien to speak. But I don't know. My sense that I get it from Sean O'Brien specifically is that he just wants attention, and he is not a guy who, clearly is not a guy who deals in good faith with Democrats. And Sean Fain, that's, to the contrast that Josiah established, Sean Fain seems very transactional. That's what you would want from your union leadership. You do this for me, I'll do this for you. Whereas Sean O'Brien, I don't know, he seems to just have kind of a fuck you, I'll just do whatever I want kind of attitude. I just want the attention in the media. And I don't know, that's not really what I would want out of my leader if I was part of that union.
No, not at all. And on the topic of leverage, this kind of segues, I guess, into the last thing that I was going to bring up. And if anyone else wants to contribute to this, or if they have any other topics, feel free. But, Mehdi Hasan, someone we talked about quite a bit on this show, someone I respect immensely, and I think all of us do. He got into a prolonged back and forth with Brianna Joy Gray, I think Glenn Greenwald at one point, and I believe Jill Stein as well. Like, he was Optimus Prime in the second Transformers movies. I'll take you all on. And he was
all the Russian bots. Yes.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of the tweets were deleted. And he said, that for various reasons, he took them down. We'll take a look. But it was over the Green Party and voting third party. And this notion of who is better for Gaza, Harris or Trump. And so this was the tweet that I think that was kind of at the centerpiece of it. To all the trolls in my replies today, answer me this: if it's so vital that Harris is defeated in order to stop the genocide, and that there's no difference on Gaza apparently between Trump and Harris, between the GOP and Dems, why then do Benjamin Netanyahu and most Israelis want Trump to win, not Harris? Why did Itamar Ben-Gvir say they could do so much more under a Trump presidency? And why should I then ignore the clear desire and public intent of the people literally doing the genocide and listen instead to you? And I think that this thing was kind of like the predicate for the entire conversation. So I was curious if people saw Mehdi Hasan's melee with Brianna Joy Gray and others, and what they thought about all this.
The Mehdi, with some of his deleted tweets, was reaching levels of base previously thought impossible by scientists. He had a lot of really,
he's usually pretty good. He's usually pretty good.
No, he's usually pretty good, but specifically on this, he was really going in on him. And look, I mean, one of the arguments for pro-Palestinian protesters, which I think is accurate, right? One of the arguments that they make is, look, the only reason Israel doesn't just completely expel all Palestinians, like this current right-wing government, and go full on genocidal against them, is because of attitudinal international constraints. Oh, if they did that, then, and this is a counter argument to if they're genociding the Palestinians, then why aren't they just killing all of them or expelling all of them right now? The argument is that because of international constraints, they want that happen. Look, when the leaders of the right-wing government of Israel say, well, we would do a whole lot more of these policies that you don't like if Trump were in office, I think you should probably take their word for it, right? Like, they probably are telling the truth. And so insofar as you're a single issue Gaza, Israel-Palestine voter, of course, it's just obvious that you'd rather have a Kamala in office that imposes some level of constraint to that government than Trump, who has said he would impose no constraint, which is the understanding that the right-wing government of Israel also has, that there would be much less constraints if they were able to deal with Trump instead of Kamala.
Hutch, what about you, buddy?
Sorry, what was the question?
The question
on the response
on Mehdi Hassan's brawl with Jill Stein, her running mate Brianna.
Oh
Joy
man,
Boy.
I don't want to, dude. I don't want to open a can of worms right before we're about to end the podcast with Israel-Palestine stuff. So,
nothing to say on that. All right, fair enough.
Nothing to say. I've covering that for like 9 months was brutal. So yeah.
So on this issue, I have two major thoughts. The first is that the most important thing is first defending American democracy. And I'm sorry, in my opinion, that has to happen before we can even talk about any specific foreign policy issue. It's like putting on your mask before helping on someone else. That American democracy, if that's in the balance, that needs to be addressed first. But even putting that aside and imagine that you are a single issue voter and all you cared about was Gaza and what you consider to be a genocide happening in Gaza. You need to understand, no one else is going to tell you the truth. I'm about to tell you the truth. If Kamala Harris were to come out today and say, this is a genocide, when I'm president, I'm not going to support any aid whatsoever to Bibi Netanyahu, at all, and we're going to stop it because there's genocide, and we might even put sanctions on Israel. Number one, you have a civil war in the administration because Joe Biden's not going to do that. Kamala Harris can't do that. Kamala Harris has no policy, and so there's a civil war within the administration. There is now a civil war within the Democratic Party as well because this issue think about John Fetterman in Pennsylvania and what he's going to do in Pennsylvania and the kind of trouble that's going to be stirred by all the pro-Israel simps in the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris has a responsibility to win this election. And if you care about the people of Gaza, it's going to be a materially different. And the reason why it's going to be material different is because nobody can answer Mehdi Hassan's question. It's going to be material different between that and the scenario where Trump wins. And if she starts talking big on Israel, I'm sorry to say they do have leverage. You're going to see a bloodbath in the Democratic Party, and it will minimize the chance that Kamala Harris wins the election and therefore increase the suffering of the Palestinian people.
All right,
I do want to say something real quick.
I'm going to bait Hutch into this. So hang on, Hutch. Okay. You got it. This question is teed up for you.
Okay.
If Josiah just got done describing how to apply pressure, what is the uncommitted movement supposed to do to get Harris to say she'll condition weapons to Israel? All right, buddy, come on.
I mean, sometimes look, I don't know how to it's difficult to talk about this topic because especially if you have a familial connection to the region, I totally empathize with feeling really strongly about this issue. What's difficult for me to stomach sometimes is if Donald Trump is elected, number one, it would be worse for Palestine. It would be worse for the people of Gaza. Number two, what do you think would happen to Ukrainians? Like day one, he would go out of his way to make sure that Ukrainians don't have any more funding, and it would result literally in Ukrainians being massacred by an invading country. And so I don't want to say I doubt their sincerity because I don't. I do think these people actually care about this issue, but I think they're being so short-sighted. And when it comes to what can the uncommitted movement do to force this or that foreign policy? It's dude. Sometimes you can't force your way into a policy. Sometimes you can't sometimes the answer is no. And I know that sucks sometimes, but I do think Kamala would be better than Biden. She seems to take a stronger tone when it comes to this kind of thing. The other thing too is a lot of people in that movement treat Israel as though it's this vassal state of the United States. And it's not, especially when you dig into the history of God, why am I spacing on his name? I'm getting my brains fried. Who's the guy in charge of it? Netanyahu. Netanyahu, especially, he has a really particular grievance with the Democratic Party going all the way back to Clinton, and it especially heated up during Obama. And he's an
incredibly talented politician. Do not underestimate him. He's very talented.
Listen, I mean, he's shrewd and he's definitely calculated. He's put him up there with Mitch McConnell. You know what I mean? You don't like what they do, but you got to respect the game. He's not someone that you can just force to do things. And they always talk about now you got me ranting a little bit, but they always talk about the Israel-Lebanon war in the early 80s. And they talk about how they claim that Reagan forced an end to that war with just by picking up the phone. No, he didn't. He stopped one particular bombing campaign that resulted in over 100 civilian casualties. It was a huge catastrophic error that Israel made. But they continued to fight in this war for another year and a half. And so they get the history wrong too. There's so much about this. topic that is so frustrating, but at the same time, like I am an empathetic person, and I do understand like how horrific these images are and how horrific it would be to be a Palestinian in Gaza right now. And so yeah, for so many reasons it's difficult to talk about, and I'm so conflicted on this issue, and in many ways I feel like a lot of the pro-Palestinian people just do their movement a disservice over and over and over again, just put on a clinic for how to like lose support with the tactics that they've chosen. I just don't, I'm not on the same page with them at all.
Yeah, I was just going to say the uncommitted movement, which by the way, I did support, particularly in the primary. And I think it's a perfectly fair and valid exercise of your civic leverage. I think, unfortunately, to Hutch's point, sometimes the application of leverage doesn't work. And then knowing that you have not extracted the concessions that you wanted, then you have to evaluate your options. And what I would say is, I think that anyone in the uncommitted movement has a moral obligation, if they're an eligible voter, to vote for a viable candidate that is likely to do the least amount of harm. The reason I say viable candidate is because if you vote for Jill Stein, mathematically, you are increasing the likelihood that Donald Trump wins. And so if you accept the premise that of the three candidates, Trump will be the most harmful to Palestinians and most friendly to Israel, which is clearly what Israel believes, then by definition, you voting for Jill Stein will have enabled the worst option, which is Trump. If you think Trump is the best option, if you're one of those people out there who somehow believes that Trump, because he's a deal maker, businessman, or whatever, that he's actually more likely to check Netanyahu, which is not what Netanyahu and Itamar Ben-Gvir believe, but maybe they're stupid and wrong. Maybe you know better. If you think that Donald Trump is the best option to end this conflict, then you should vote for Trump.
I mean, really think about it. They're going to put Jared Kushner back in the administration. Jared Kushner, who negotiated the Abraham Accords. I mean, it's all being supported by these billionaires who are, I'm not doing any kind of Jewish wink conspiracy thing, but like by billionaire tech people who are very, very, very pro-Israel and who are funding the Trump's campaign. Trump is super pro-Israel. Like, how can we think that he is going to have an about face and all of a sudden support sovereignty for the Palestinian people? It's never going to happen.
And what were the Abraham Accords? We broke with decades of foreign policy. It was our stated foreign policy when it came to Israel to push for a two-state solution going back decades. And Donald Trump was the first president to break from that. And the Abraham Accords iced out Palestinians from all of these normalization talks. And instead of offering them a state, they offered them $400 billion. And of course, Hamas said no. Like, they're not driven by this. Like, you can't buy them off. And you can draw a straight line from the Abraham Accords to October 7.
Sure.
Yeah.
And also we should just say that there were people talk about how the Abraham Accords, ended conflict and was a Middle East peace. It was not. The belligerents involved in the Abraham Accords were not an active conflict anyway. It was just basically a de jure recognition of de facto relations between the belligerents in question. Again, I'll go back to Ogre Boy because they brought this up. I'm not an accelerationist by any capacity, but when does it become the fault of the candidate as opposed to the electorate? The 99% H guy, lesser evil shit doesn't win the day forever. Again, happy to hear what anybody else has to say, but just let me say, it's not about assigning blame. You can still, if you genuinely believe that this is a genocide and that you believe that because the United States is providing armed assistance to Israel, that the United States government is complicit in it, you can morally condemn Kamala Harris. You can still blame her. It can still be her fault. But all of us in the electoral process, from the candidate to the voter, have agency, and we are to some extent, by your own logic, morally culpable, right? If your vote is basically a moral declaration, because this is what I hear from a lot of people. I'm not going to vote for X, Y, and Z because I don't want to reward or be morally complicit in genocide. That suggests that how you vote has moral weight to it. And if you vote or don't vote in such a way that you enable the worst outcome, then yes, you have transgressed morally. It is your fault too.
Not making a choice is making a choice. I'm sorry to have to tell you that, but that is the reality. And if you can look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, I'm indifferent between those two as relates Gaza, that's on you. That's on you. And you'll have
and
to
you don't get to call yourself anti-genocide in that spot because the label doesn't apply. It doesn't apply. You're lying to yourself. It's a purely performative thing to make you feel or appear more morally superior than everybody else. That's all it is. Let's just call a spade a spade.
I don't think
And
anybody would judge anybody for not being enthusiastic about voting for Kamala or for, being, in fact, again, like Hutch said, depending on who you are, potentially quite angry about Kamala's policy. But again, we have to expect people to think holistically with the actions that they take. Look, if let's just say that you're like Rashida Tlaib, you have family in Gaza, right? You have family in Gaza. You're a Palestinian American. Let's just say that is who you are. You have every reason to not like Kamala, to hate Kamala, to think that she's terrible on that issue. You have every reason to think that. But you don't have a reason to disregard the thoughts and opinions and desires of every other group in this country that would be very materially better off for Kamala. And you certainly, if you're in that situation, don't have reason to believe that it's irrelevant, the choice between Kamala and Trump. Of course, it's very relevant. And so, look, it's the same thing that we said about the aluminum workers earlier. Aluminum workers might have very good material reasons for saying, I'm voting for Trump instead of Hillary, right? Very interpersonally good reasons, okay? But it's still a bad vote. It's still not good to vote for Trump, right? And it's still not good to vote for Jill Stein, and it's still not good to sit out this election.
Rashida Tlaib has said a lot of things that I disagree with, but I totally understand. If I imagine being in her shoes and having family in the region, it's kind of like, you don't really have to think about it that hard. It's like, yeah, of course, you understand why that is. You don't have to like everything they say. You don't have to like all of their positions, but you can have some patience for that. I'm not talking about people that have a familial tie to the region. I'm talking about these like purely performative leftists that are just so loud on social media, and they're so eager to throw the G word around to sort of stop any kind of conversation. And it's just frustrating. It's really, really frustrating.
Adam has gone back to his abusive ex. He says, I was not going to vote for Jill, but I guess I have to vote for Trump now. Last thing I want to point out before we go is just this. AOC and Jamie Raskin did send a letter to Chief Justice Roberts because they heard our episode of Live and Learn, or my conversation with Pisco about this. It was reported in the New York Times that Chief Justice Roberts removed Alito from an opinion writing assignment pertaining to January 6th, 4 days after the Alito flag story broke. It was historically unprecedented. So AOC and Jamie Raskin heard our conversation. They were like, you know what? That timing seems suspicious. If Chief Justice Roberts took the opinion away from Alito because he thought it would make the court look bad, then that gives enormous weight to calls for Alito's recusal and things like that. So it basically strengthens the case that Alito should not have been, making decisions about a case that he's apparently too biased or has the appearance of bias and impropriety such that he can't write the opinion on. Basically, if you can write the opinion on it, you can vote for it, and vice versa. And if Roberts made the decision to remove that case from Alito because he thought it would make the court look bad, then it sounds like he had an obligation to push for Alito's recusal and did not do that. So they have sent a letter to Chief Justice Roberts to try to get answers on that. Pisco, any words?
Yeah, to put a finer point on that, Josiah is absolutely right. I don't change my opinion based on what I know to be the facts based on public reporting. There might be something else that someone else is aware of, and perhaps that person is the chief. But if the standard is you recuse yourself, if a reasonable person would think that there's a conflict of interest or there's the appearance of bias, if a reasonable person would think that that's the standard, let's say, even just an appearance of impropriety, then the Chief Justice, if it is the case that he removed Alito because of that appearance related to the story of the flag, then I don't believe the Chief Justice is an unreasonable person by the standards of reasonability legally, right? And so it is, I think, a tacit admission from the perspective of the Chief Justice that a reasonable person would think that Justice Alito had the appearance of bias. And so that is the standard. And if he's changing assignments based on that standard, then why isn't Alito recusing himself? And if the answer is, well, the chief would want him to recuse himself, but Alito can't, I think that's something that we should know as American people.
Agreed. So how about that, Akana boy? Chief Justice Roberts may have netted us a last-second three-pointer. You know what I mean? A buzzer beater right there at the very end. May have just tipped it over for us.
I mean, look, I know that Wick talks a lot of trash about this issue, but I don't know, man. he seems to be proven more dead wrong by the day on this issue.
Don't
I mean,
bet
it
on
really
Wick.
does. Look, I mean, Wick. I think that some people like Wick, unfortunately, they have this sort of bias towards sensibility. Almost like you could say, like it's like, well, almost, it's like we criticize like the Adam and Sid show for the same thing, like, oh, calling it down the middle. We just care about the facts here, right? And it's like, I feel like that bias towards almost like always assuming there must be a moderate solution to things is not correct. Like sometimes you need radical solutions for things, and this radical Supreme Court, we just might need to really think outside the box, right? I mean, that's all I'm saying on this issue. And yeah, when it comes to this issue specifically, yeah, I mean, I don't think Chief Justice Roberts is an unreasonable person, and if he thought that it would look bad for Alito to be right in this opinion at the same time that his wife has this obsession with flags,
and that's the standard.
Then anyone else would, any reasonable person would say that. So I don't know. It seems seems a little sus to me.
Agreed. Well, folks, I appreciate it. I know Hutch has to go, so we're going to call it a day, but thanks for staying a little later with us.
Hey, Adam, join us sometime. We'd love to have you.
I should say again, and Adam, in all seriousness, even though we staunchly disagree, and I think you've blocked 4 out of 4 of us on
Wait, 4 out of 4?
He unblocked me. He unblocked me.
Oh, he unblocked you? Well,
I'm the chosen one. Yeah.
I was never blocked.
Fuck you, Pisco.
Okay.
Let me see if I'm blocked. I'm curious. It may just be still me at this point.
Adam loves me. All right.
I'm gonna say he
Adam
unblocked
loves
you.
everything.
I'm gonna say he unblocked you.
Adam hates everything.
Adam friended.
Or is it
You're
something
blocked?
Else? I don't know.
Wow.
Wow.
God damn. All right. Love for Hutch, but not for me. That's too bad. Pisco, are you still blocked?
Because I'm better.
Sorry, I haven't checked though. I know Sitch just replied to me, so I don't think Sitch banned me.
Oh, that's good. No, Sitch. I don't think Sitch blocked me either. I think it was just Adam. It was just Adam.
I'll check tonight.
Sadly, yeah, please do, because if I'm the odd man out on this, I will be profoundly offended. Especially
for some reason, I'm the most hated.
Well, I mean, just, your personality and your entire bearing and all that. No, but thanks for being the foil in this chat. Of course, people who disagree with us, they are welcome. They just want to DM us. I can send them a link to the restream. And I think we can have up to 10 guests at a time. So if you want to bring Sitch next time or somebody else, that way it's not like a 4v1 or whatever, you're more than welcome to. Appreciate it, folks. Everyone else, thank you for chatting, contributing.